John Winters checked his email again, wondering if the invitation was real. The message glowed on his screen. "We would be honored to have you as a guest on Real Talk with Bill Murray to discuss your breakthrough in quantum teleportation." John leaned back in his office chair and looked out the window at the Mars colony visible in the distance. The red landscape stretched far beyond the dome that protected New Houston, humanity's largest settlement on the red planet. At 45, John had become one of the most respected scientists in the solar system. His work had made it possible for humans to transport matter across vast distances, revolutionizing space travel and colonization. He clicked the message closed and turned to the small wooden cross that sat on his desk. Most scientists kept photos of family or awards in that spot. John kept his faith close, though he rarely spoke about it. The office door slid open with a soft hiss. Lisa Garcia walked in, her lab coat still on from the morning experiments. At 38, Lisa had worked with John for over a decade as his research partner and closest friend. "So, are you going to do it?" she asked, dropping into the chair across from his desk. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes showed both excitement and concern. "I don't know," John replied. "Murray isn't exactly known for his love of science or scientists or religion." Lisa shrugged. "That's exactly why you should go. NASA just cut our funding by 15%. We need public support, and you're the face people trust." She gestured toward the wall of awards behind him. "Besides, the teleportation system needs defending after that accident on Europa Station." John winced at the mention of the accident. 3 months ago, a power fluctuation had caused a failed teleportation that destroyed valuable equipment. No one had been hurt, but critics had been loud. "Murray will ask about more than science," John said quietly. "You know how those shows work. They dig into your personal life." Lisa's expression softened. "You mean your faith?" John nodded. The year 2087 had seen religious practice fall to historic lows, especially among scientists and the cultural elite. John's quiet Christianity made him unusual among his peers. "So what?" Lisa spread her hands. "You've never hidden it. You've never pushed it on anyone either. It's different on a show like that. They make you a target." Lisa stood up and walked to the window, looking at the red landscape beyond. "The Mars colony wouldn't exist without your work, John. You've earned the right to believe whatever you want." She turned to face him. "And maybe some people need to hear from a brilliant scientist who also happens to have faith." John tapped his fingers on his desk, thinking, "I'll consider it." Later that evening, John sat in his apartment watching old clips of Real Talk with Bill Murray on his wall screen. The show was broadcast from Earth but viewed across the solar system. Murray had a talent for making his guests comfortable before surprising them with questions designed to embarrass or provoke. Scientists were frequent targets. John paused the screen on Murray's smirking face. The host was interviewing a biologist who had just explained her work on coral restoration when Murray suddenly asked, "But isn't it true that you donated to the Religious Freedom Coalition last year?" The biologist had been caught off guard, stumbling through an explanation while Murray watched with amusement. John's phone buzzed. His sister Karen was calling from Earth. "Hey," he answered, her face appearing on his screen. Karen lived in New Angeles, teaching physics at the university there. At 42, she looked much like John with the same dark blonde hair and blue eyes. "Tell me you're not really going on that awful show," she said without greeting. John smiled. "News travels fast. NASA sent out a press notice an hour ago. It's all over the science channels." Karen looked worried. "That man is a snake, John. He traps people." "I haven't decided yet," John replied. Karen leaned forward. "Do you remember what happened to Dr. Sanchez last year? Murray invited him to talk about his climate work and then ambushed him about his divorce." "I remember. And Murray hates religion. He calls it humanity's longest-running delusion at least once a week." Karen's concern was clear in her voice. "He's going to try to make you look foolish." John nodded. "Probably. Then why even consider it?" John was quiet for a moment, looking at the small cross on his desk again. Because sometimes you have to show up in difficult places. Karen sighed. You always were stubborn. Her expression softened. Just be careful, okay? These media types, they don't play fair. After saying goodbye to his sister, John stood at his window watching the sunset on Mars. The sky turned deep, blue, then purple, as the sun dipped below the horizon. The stars emerged, brighter and clearer than they ever looked from Earth. John had spent his life studying the universe, unlocking its secrets, bit by bit. Yet the more he learned, the more wonder he felt. Some of his colleagues found his faith puzzling. How could someone who worked with quantum physics believe in God? For John, the question was reversed. How could he see the beautiful complexity of reality and not believe in something greater? The next morning, John sent his response to the show's producers. He would appear on Real Talk with Bill Murray in 2 weeks when he was scheduled to visit Earth for a conference. The days passed quickly. John prepared for his scientific presentation at the conference and thought about what he might say if Murray brought up his faith. He didn't want to argue or become defensive, that wasn't his way. 1 week before the show, John received a message from Samantha Lewis, the show's producer. She outlined the planned topics: his quantum teleportation breakthrough, the future of space colonization, and the recent Europa Station accident. Nothing about religion or his personal beliefs was mentioned, but John wasn't fooled. They'll save that for the show, Lisa said when he showed her the message. They were in the lab, testing improvements to the teleportation system. They want your reaction to be fresh and unplanned. I know, John replied. It's fine. I'm not ashamed of what I believe. Lisa studied him for a moment. You're really not worried, are you? John smiled. Let's just say I have faith it will work. Out. The morning of his departure for Earth, John looked around his Mars apartment one last time. The journey would take only minutes thanks to his own teleportation technology, but he always felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness before using the system himself. He picked up the small wooden cross from his desk and tucked it into his pocket. Then he stepped into the teleportation chamber, ready to be disassembled into data and transmitted across the void to Earth, where Bill Murray and his audience waited. John stepped out of the teleportation chamber in New Angeles and took a deep breath. Earth air felt different from the carefully filtered atmosphere of the Mars colony. Richer, heavier, filled with the scents of plants and soil. He had forgotten how much he missed it. A young woman with a tablet approached him. Dr. Winters, I'm Samantha Lewis, producer for Real Talk. Welcome to Earth. She offered her hand, which John shook firmly. Thank you, John said. It's been almost a year since my last visit. Your transportation method certainly makes the journey easier, Samantha said with a smile. The show is honored to have the father of quantum teleportation with us. She led him through the busy teleportation center. People rushed in all directions, some heading to the moon colonies, others to Mars or the orbital stations. John's invention had changed how humanity moved through the solar system, making space feel less vast and lonely. The car is waiting outside, Samantha said. We'll take you to your hotel first. The show records tomorrow evening, but we'd like you at the studio in the morning for setup and pre-interviews. John nodded. That works for me. My conference presentation isn't until the day after the show. As they rode through the streets of New Angeles, John looked out at the city. Sleek buildings rose into the clouds, their surfaces covered with plants and solar collectors. Flying cars moved in orderly lines above the ground traffic. It was beautiful in its way, but John found himself missing the red landscape of Mars already. Here's your schedule for tomorrow, Samantha said, sending a file to his phone. You'll be our main guest with about 20 minutes of interview time. Who else will be on the show? John asked. Samantha checked her tablet. Dr. Alan Price will be our second guest. He's promoting his new book. John tried not to show his surprise. Alan Price was one of the loudest voices speaking against religion in scientific circles. His book, Delusions of Divinity, Why Belief Persists in the Space Age, had been a bestseller last year. I see, John said quietly. The setup was becoming clear. At the hotel, John found a message waiting from his sister Karen. "I got us dinner reservations at Chen's Garden at 7. Her message read, "We need to talk before your show." John smiled. Karen always looked out for him, even though he was the older sibling. He sent back a quick, "See you there," and unpacked his small bag. Chen's Garden was on the 95th floor of a downtown building, offering views of the entire city. Karen was already waiting when John arrived, looking sharp in her university teaching clothes. "You look good for someone who just traveled from another planet," she said, hugging him. "The wonders of my own technology," John replied with a smile as they sat down. "No more 6-month journeys in cramped spaceships." After they ordered, Karen leaned forward. "I did some digging. Price is going to be on the show with you." "I know," the producer told me. "Do you know they've paired you two before?" 3 months ago, Murray introduced Price's book by saying it should be required reading for science-minded people still clinging to outdated beliefs. "He was talking about people like you, John." John nodded. "I figured it was something like that." Karen looked frustrated. "And you're still going through with it? It's a trap." "Probably," John agreed, "but running away won't help." Their food arrived, and they ate in silence for a few minutes. The sun was setting over New Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Solar collectors on the buildings glittered in the fading light. "What will you say?" Karen finally asked. "If Murray tries to embarrass you about your faith?" John considered the question. "The truth, I guess, that I don't see any conflict between science and faith, that the universe is too amazing to be an accident." Karen sighed. "They'll call you naive. They'll say you're compartmentalizing." "Maybe I am," John said with a small smile, "but I don't think so. When I look at the quantum level of reality, I see patterns that suggest meaning, not randomness. I see beauty that goes beyond function." "Save that for your next book," Karen said. "On television, keep it simple. Don't let Murray trap you in a corner." After dinner, John walked back to his hotel. The streets were busy with people enjoying the evening. He felt the small wooden cross in his pocket, a reminder of what centered him. In his hotel room, John reviewed the materials for his conference. Presentation. His team had made progress on improving the safety protocols for the teleportation system after the Europa Station incident. The improvements would prevent similar accidents in the future. His phone buzzed with a message from Lisa, back on Mars. "Don't let them rattle you tomorrow. The team is cheering for you." John smiled and sent back his thanks. He was lucky to have good people around him. The next morning, a car picked John up early and took him to the studio. The building was huge, with "Real Talk" displayed in giant letters across the front. Inside, staff members rushed around preparing for the day's show. Samantha met him in the lobby. "Good morning, Dr. Winters. We'll get you to makeup first, then the pre-interview." Makeup took 30 minutes, with the artist working to reduce the shine on John's face under the hot studio lights. Then he was led to a small room where a young man with a tablet waited to do the pre-interview. "This is just to give Bill some talking points," the man explained. "Nothing too deep. Just tell me about your work and what you're hoping to discuss today." John explained his quantum teleportation system in simple terms, and how the technology had opened up the solar system for human exploration. He described the improvements his team was making after the Europa Station accident. "Fascinating," the man said, though he looked bored. Then he asked casually, "And is it true that you're religious? That's unusual for someone in your field." There it was. The trap was being laid. "I have faith, yes," John answered calmly. "But I don't see that as conflicting with my scientific work." The man nodded, making a note. "Great. Bill will probably be interested in that perspective." After the pre-interview, John was taken to a green room to wait. The television showed the studio where the show would be filmed. Chairs were being arranged, lights adjusted. The door opened and a man walked in. He was tall and thin with perfectly styled gray hair and sharp eyes. John recognized him immediately from his book cover photos. "Dr. Price," John said, standing and offering his hand. "Dr. Winters, Price replied, shaking his hand briefly. "I've followed your work with interest. Your quantum teleportation theory is quite brilliant." "Thank you," John said. "I haven't read your book yet, but I've heard it's very popular." Price smiled, showing very white teeth. "Yes, people seem ready to move beyond ancient superstitions. Even scientists like yourself." Before John could respond, Samantha appeared at the door. "We're ready for you both. The show starts in 10 minutes. As they walked toward the studio, John took a deep breath and felt the small cross in his pocket. Whatever happened on the show, he would face it with honesty and calm. The studio lights were bright and hot. John blinked as he walked onto the set following Samantha's directions. The audience, about 200 people, applauded as he and Dr. Price made their way to the guest chairs. Bill Murray stood to greet them, flashing his famous smile. He was shorter in person than he appeared on screen, but his presence filled the room. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his blue suit looked expensive. "Welcome to Real Talk," Murray said, shaking John's hand firmly. "It's an honor to have the man who changed space travel forever on our show." "Thank you for having me," John replied politely. Murray turned to shake Price's hand. "And Dr. Price, always a pleasure. Your new book is making quite a splash." "People are ready for rational thinking," Price said with a confident smile. The three men sat down, John and Price in guest chairs facing Murray's desk. A makeup artist rushed over for last-minute touch-ups, and a producer counted down from 10. 3, 2, 1, she said, then pointed at Murray. "Good evening and welcome to Real Talk," Murray said to the camera. "Tonight we have two brilliant minds joining us. Dr. John Winters, the physicist whose quantum teleportation system has opened up the solar system for human exploration, and Dr. Alan Price, author of the best-selling book, Delusions of Divinity. Gentlemen, welcome to the show." The audience applauded again, and John smiled politely. The first segment went smoothly. Murray asked intelligent questions about quantum physics, and John explained his work in terms the audience could understand. He described how particles could be linked across space, allowing for instant transportation. "Essentially, we scan and break down the original object at the molecular level," John explained. "That information is transmitted to the destination, where the object is rebuilt exactly as it was." "Including people?" Murray asked. "Yes. The human body is just organized matter after all. We can break it down into data and rebuild it perfectly. Some religious leaders have claimed this process destroys the soul," Murray said, "that the person who steps out at the other end isn't the same person. Any comment on that?" Here it comes, John thought. The first probe. "Those are interesting philosophical questions," John said carefully. "But from a scientific perspective, the person who steps out has the same memories, the same brain patterns, and the same physical structure. All our tests show complete continuity of consciousness." Murray nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. They discussed the Europa Station accident, and John explained the new safety measures his team was implementing. "That's fascinating stuff," Murray said. "We'll be right back after these messages." The cameras stopped rolling and staff rushed onto the set with water for the guests. "Going well so far," Murray said to John. "The audience is engaged, that's good." John nodded but remained cautious. The real questions hadn't started yet. When the show resumed, Murray turned to Dr. Price. "Your new book argues that religious belief is holding back human progress. Can you explain that for our audience?" Price leaned forward eagerly. "Throughout history, religion has opposed scientific advancement. From Galileo to modern stem cell research, religion has tried to limit human knowledge. Now that we've moved into space, we're finally seeing people let go of these old superstitions. Not everyone, though," Murray said, glancing at John. "No, not everyone," Price agreed. "Some people still compartmentalize their thinking. They're rational in the lab, but revert to magical thinking in their personal lives." The audience murmured, and cameras zoomed in on John's face. He kept his expression calm, though he felt his heart beating faster. "Dr. Winters," Murray said, turning to face him, "you're considered one of the most brilliant scientific minds of our time. Yet I understand you're also religious. How do you respond to Dr. Price's points?" The studio went quiet. This was the moment the show had been building toward. John could feel the weight of all eyes on him. "I respect Dr. Price's views," John began, "but I think he's creating a false division. Many great scientists throughout history had faith. Newton, Faraday, Planck, Collins. They saw no conflict between understanding the natural world and believing in something beyond it. But that was before we understood so much about the universe," Price interrupted. "We know now that there's no need for a divine creator. Physics explains everything without that hypothesis." "Does it?" John asked quietly. "Physics tells us how things work, but it doesn't tell us why they exist at all. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why does the universe follow mathematical laws that humans can understand? These are questions science alone can't answer." Murray leaned forward, sensing conflict. "So you're saying science has limits?" "Of course it has limits," John replied. "Science is a tool for understanding the physical world. It's the best tool we have for that purpose. But it's not designed to address questions of meaning or purpose." Price laughed. "Meaning and purpose are human inventions. The universe doesn't care about them." "Perhaps," John said, "but humans do care about them, and dismissing those questions doesn't make them go away." Murray turned to the audience. "Interesting debate. But Dr. Winters, I'm curious. In this age of interplanetary travel and quantum physics, you still believe in a 2,000-year-old carpenter who supposedly walked on water?" The audience laughed, and cameras focused on John's face again. The trap was fully sprung now. Murray had moved from general religious belief to specifically mocking Christianity. "It's fascinating, isn't it?" Murray continued, playing to the audience. "The same brain that can unravel quantum mysteries still clings to ancient mythology." The audience laughed again, but more uncertainly this time. Some people seemed uncomfortable with the direct mockery. "Dr. Price," Murray said, "what do you make of this cognitive dissonance?" Price straightened in his chair. "It's a perfect example of compartmentalization. Brilliant minds can wall off sections of rational thought to preserve comfortable delusions. It's like having a supercomputer that still runs Windows 95 on one partition," Price added with a smile. This generated more laughter from the audience. Throughout this exchange, John remained calm. He didn't appear angry or defensive, just patient. His lack of reaction seemed to irritate Murray, who had expected either embarrassment or angry defense. "Dr. Winters," Murray said, leaning forward, "don't you find it embarrassing when your colleagues discover your spiritual proclivities?" The question hung in the air. The audience went completely silent, waiting for John's answer. Some looked embarrassed by Murray's direct attack, while others seemed eager to see how John would respond. John took a deep breath. He could feel the small, wooden cross in his pocket. For a moment, he thought about all the people watching across Earth and the colonies. His team on Mars, his sister Karen, countless young scientists who might look up to him. What he said next mattered, not just for him, but for them too. He looked Murray directly in the eyes, ready to respond. John took a moment before responding, his voice steady and thoughtful when he finally spoke. "Bill, when I was 12 years old, my father took me to the old Griffith Observatory in what was then called Los Angeles. I looked through a telescope for the first time and saw the rings of Saturn with my own eyes." John paused, remembering that night. The audience was completely silent, perhaps surprised by this personal story instead of a defensive argument. "In that moment," John continued, "I felt two things at once. First, a desire to understand the mechanics of that beautiful system, how gravity and motion created those perfect rings. But I also felt something deeper, a sense of wonder that went beyond the physical explanation." Murray opened his mouth as if to interrupt with a joke, but something in John's calm expression made him stop. "Throughout my career," John said, "I've discovered that the deeper I go into quantum physics, the more I encounter mystery at the foundation of reality. The universe isn't just stranger than we imagine. It's stranger than we can imagine." Glanced at Dr. Price. "My faith isn't despite my science, but because of it." Price frowned. "That's not logical. Science explains." John held up a hand politely. Alan, you characterized faith as a delusion that requires compartmentalization. But what I've found is integration. The same methods that make me rigorous in the lab, intellectual honesty, humility before evidence, and openness to having my assumptions challenged, are the ones that inform my spiritual journey. The cameras panned across the audience. People were leaning forward in their seats, listening intently. This wasn't the shouting match or embarrassed retreat they had expected. John turned back to Murray. You asked if I'm embarrassed. No. What would embarrass me would be pretending to know everything or dismissing the profound experiences of billions of people throughout human history as mere delusion. What would embarrass me would be closing my mind to possibility simply because it doesn't fit my preconceptions. Murray shifted in his seat, clearly unsure how to respond to this measured tone. Science has revealed a universe far stranger than ancient humans could have imagined, John continued. Quantum particles that exist in multiple states until observed. Space and time as a single fabric. Particles that communicate instantly across vast distances, defying our notions of locality. John leaned forward slightly. Given these realities that defy common sense, I remain open to mystery and meaning, beyond what our current instruments can measure. The studio was completely silent. Murray's usual quick wit failed him as he processed John's response. Dr. Price stared at his shoes, suddenly looking less confident. After several seconds of silence, a young woman in the audience stood up and began clapping. Others joined her until the entire audience was giving John a standing ovation. Not necessarily because they shared his beliefs, but because they recognized the authenticity and thoughtfulness of his response. When the applause finally died down, Murray attempted to recover with humor. Well, I think we need a commercial break to recover from having our minds expanded, he said, but his voice lacked its usual edge. As the cameras stopped rolling, Murray leaned over to John. That wasn't what I expected, he admitted quietly. It rarely is when you actually listen to people instead of their caricatures, John replied with a kind smile. During the break, audience members whispered among themselves. The atmosphere in the studio had changed. What had been set up as a mockery had turned into something more meaningful. When the show resumed, Murray's tone was noticeably different. Before the break, Dr. Winters shared his perspective on the relationship between science and faith. Dr. Price, would you like to respond? Price cleared his throat. While I maintain that there's no empirical evidence for any divine presence in the universe, I can respect Dr. Winters' approach. At least he's not denying scientific evidence or trying to force his beliefs on others. That's very generous of you, Murray said with a touch of sarcasm. It's not about generosity, Price replied. It's about honest dialogue. Perhaps I've been too quick to lump all religious believers together. John nodded appreciatively at Price. And perhaps people of faith have been too defensive at times, or unwilling to engage with scientific discoveries that challenge traditional interpretations. There's room for growth on both sides. The conversation continued more respectfully for the remainder of the show. They discussed the ethical implications of teleportation technology, the future of space colonization, and the big questions that science and religion both attempt to answer in different ways. When the show ended, the audience gave all three men a standing ovation. As John walked backstage, several staff members nodded to him with newfound respect. Samantha Lewis approached John backstage. That wasn't what we expected, she admitted. It rarely is when you actually listen to people instead of their caricatures, John repeated kindly. As John was gathering his things to leave, Dr. Price appeared at the door of the green room. Dr. Winters, he said somewhat stiffly, I wanted to say that while I don't agree with your conclusions, I respect your approach. You didn't resort to saying you just have to have faith or any of the usual non-answers. Thank you, John replied. Your book raised important questions, even if I see the answers differently. Price hesitated, then asked, Would you be willing to continue this conversation sometime? Perhaps a public dialogue at one of the universities? John smiled. I'd be happy to. The only way forward is through honest conversation. After Price left, John checked his phone. He had dozens of messages, waiting. His sister Karen had sent a simple text. "You made me proud." His team on Mars had watched the broadcast together in the lab. Lisa wrote, "The whole colony is talking about your answers. Way to represent both science and faith with dignity." There were also messages from strangers. Scientists who had hidden their beliefs, religious people who had felt excluded from science, and many who simply appreciated his thoughtful approach to a complex topic. John put the phone away and touched the small wooden cross in his pocket. The evening hadn't gone as Murray planned. Instead of mockery leading to embarrassment or anger, it had led to a real conversation. Perhaps that was a small miracle in itself. As John left the studio, a young production assistant stopped him. "Dr. Winters," she said quietly, "I just wanted to say thank you. I'm studying physics at the university and I've been afraid to tell anyone about my faith. After watching you tonight, I feel like maybe I don't have to choose between the two parts of myself." John smiled at her. "You never did," he said gently. "The universe is vast enough for both wonder and understanding." Outside, the stars were visible above New Angeles, bright points of light in the darkness. John looked up at them, feeling a profound sense of both the scientific beauty of those nuclear furnaces and the deeper wonder they had inspired in humans throughout history. Sometimes, he thought, the most important discoveries happen not in laboratories but in conversations, not through mockery but through mutual respect and honest questions. He had come to Earth prepared for conflict but found connection instead. The next morning, John woke up in his hotel room to find that clips from the show had gone viral across Earth and the colonies. His phone had so many messages that it kept buzzing until he put it on silent mode. The top science news sites all featured headlines about his appearance. "Quantum physicist defends faith on Real Talk, surprising host. John Winters bridges science-religion gap on Murray show." The reply that silenced a studio, Winters versus Murray. John sat on the edge of his bed feeling overwhelmed. He had only wanted to speak honestly. He hadn't expected his words to reach so many people. His sister Karen called as he was getting ready for his conference presentation. "You're everywhere, John," she said when he answered. "People can't stop talking about what happened last night." "It's strange," John replied. "I only said what I believe. Nothing special." "That's exactly why it was special," Karen said. "You were honest without being defensive. You didn't attack Murray or Price. You just spoke your truth calmly." After talking with Karen, John headed to the science conference. As he walked into the building, people stopped to look at him. Some nodded in respect. Others approached to shake his hand. "Dr. Winters," said a woman wearing a physics department badge, "I want to thank you for what you said on television. My daughter watched it with me. She's been afraid to pursue science because she thought she'd have to give up her faith. Your words meant a lot to her." "I'm glad," John said simply. His presentation about the teleportation system improvements went well. The room was more crowded than expected, with people standing along the walls. John focused on the science, explaining the new safety protocols in detail. He answered technical questions with the same calm clarity he had shown on Murray's show. After the presentation, the conference director approached him. "That was excellent, Dr. Winters. And I must say your appearance on Real Talk has gotten more young people talking about physics than anything I've seen in years." "That wasn't my intention," John said. "The best impacts often aren't intentional," the director replied with a smile. Back on Mars a week later, John returned to his lab and his team. They welcomed him back with a small celebration, complete with a cake that Lisa had baked. "To our fearless leader," Lisa said, raising a cup of coffee and a toast, "who faced the lion in his den and came out stronger." John smiled. "I just answered his questions." "You did more than that," said Ben, one of the younger team members. "You showed that we don't have to check our humanity at the door when we do science, that we can be whole people." Over the following weeks, John received invitations to speak at universities, conferences, and community centers across Earth and the colonies. People wanted to hear more about his perspective on the relationship between science and faith. He accepted some invitations but turned down most, preferring to focus on his work. One invitation he did accept came from Dr. Alan Price. True to his word, Price had organized a public dialogue at New Angeles University. The auditorium was filled to capacity when the two men took the stage. "This isn't a debate," Price explained to the audience. "It's a conversation between two scientists with different views, trying to understand each other better." For 2 hours they discussed big questions: the origin of the universe, the nature of consciousness, the search for meaning in a vast cosmos. They found more common ground than either had expected. Both valued evidence and reason. Both admitted the limits of human knowledge. Both sought truth, even if they defined it differently. At the end, a student asked John if he ever had doubts about his faith. "Of course," John answered honestly. "Doubt is part of both science and faith. In science, we call it hypothesis testing. In faith, it's wrestling with hard questions. Both are paths to deeper understanding as long as we face our doubts honestly." "And do you ever have doubts about science?" another student asked Price. Price thought for a moment. "I sometimes doubt our interpretations of the evidence, or worry that we're missing something important, but I find the scientific method itself trustworthy, precisely because it builds in correction through skepticism." John nodded. "On that, we completely agree." As the school year progressed, a new course appeared in university catalogs across the solar system: Science and Meaning, Integrative Approaches to Knowledge. It examined how different ways of understanding the world could complement, rather than conflict with each other. On Mars, John returned to his regular routine of research and teaching. The Europa Station teleportation system was fully repaired with the new safety protocols in place. His team started work on the next generation of quantum transportation, which would require even less energy and provide greater stability. 1. Evening 6 months after his appearance on Murray's show, John sat in his office looking out at the red landscape. Lisa knocked on his door. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Always," John replied. Lisa sat down across from him. "We just got word from the education committee. Applications to physics programs are up 40% across the system. And get this, the biggest increase is among students from religious backgrounds." John smiled. "That's wonderful news." "You started something, you know," Lisa said. "That night on Murray's show, you opened a door that a lot of people thought was closed." "Maybe," John said. "But I think the door was always open. People just needed permission to walk through it." After Lisa left, John took out the small wooden cross from his desk drawer. It had been his father's, a simple thing made from 2 pieces of oak. Nothing fancy or elaborate. Just like faith itself, he thought. Not complicated, just profound. His computer pinged with a new message. It was from Bill Murray. "Dr. Winters," the message read, "Our show's ratings have never been better since your appearance. People seem hungry for real conversation instead of gotcha moments. Would you consider coming back as a guest host for a week? I promise no ambushes this time." John smiled as he typed his reply. "I'd be happy to, Bill. Real talk is always worth having." Outside his window, the sun was setting on Mars, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In a few hours, Earth would be visible as a bright blue star in the night sky. 2 worlds connected by technology and by the human drive to explore and understand. John thought about all the people across those worlds who were finding new ways to integrate different kinds of knowledge. Scientists and philosophers, believers and skeptics, each with pieces of a larger truth. The universe was vast enough for both wonder and understanding, for both questions and answers, for both science and faith, and for people to find their own path through the mysteries of existence, guided by both reason and heart. As the first stars appeared in the darkening Martian sky, John turned back to his work, ready for whatever discoveries tomorrow might bring.